This is Villain for All Seasons. I'm Ben.
I'm Dan. This week we're speaking to Casey Gane. Casey Gane is a journalist, writer, hip hop artist. He's a lot of things. Interesting man. Welcome back, Casey Gane.
Thank you, man.
We
Great to
Yeah,
be
we
back.
were we were just talking about you were our first episode ever, actually, when we were talking about the CIA in Jamaica, your book.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me on last time. It was a great conversation. I love your cup, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Trying to get the CIA.
It was a baby shower gift for me. So
Oh,
we had a lot
nice.
of yeah.
Oh,
It,
congratulations. Are you a father now?
I am, yeah. He's
Yes.
7.5 months now.
Ooh.
Yeah, he's a
Show
big
him the
boy.
Your sleep
back.
schedule must be a little erratic, I'm guessing.
Yeah, to say the least. Yeah.
Show him the back of the mug.
Oh yeah. This is the real gift of it.
Nixon was definitely word to Roger Stone. Nixon was definitely now, he was definitely part of the deep state, but then I think he was asking questions to I think it was William Colby about the JFK assassination.
Mhm.
Yep.
After that, he wanted to know who shot John, and after that, they had to get him out of there. He was definitely taken out by the deep state, even though he was part of it. He got too big for his britches. Same thing with
Hmm.
Reagan. When Reagan was shot. Like even if you're down with them, they'll shoot you or get you impeached.
Damn, there's so much I want to talk about, and I feel like every time we talk to you, Casey, it goes off in like such a wonderful rabbit hole. But hold on, so tell me about this. Reagan, the Hinckley shooting was part of
Yeah,
it? Okay, please go on.
I mean Hinckley was George Bush's like first cousin, and I think like Neil Bush
Yeah.
met with him like the day before, and there's all sorts of like MK Ultra connections with Hinckley, like like Mark David Chapman or Sirhan. It's all we live in a country where presidents are elected through bullets, not ballots, ever since JFK. And then
Mhm.
if you wise up and you try and go buck the system even a little bit, even if you're like Nixon was a conservative a-hole, so was Reagan, but if they're not totally fully in line with the CIA's agenda, they'll find a way to get you out of there or let you know we can have you killed at any time. So you better chill and listen to what we say.
Casey, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Last time we talked, it was basically the start of Biden. And I wanted to get your perspective on those last 4 years. And then what I wanted to really talk to you about is this kind of like what I've been thinking about is like Trump really courting this like conspiracy theory vote. So maybe that's just a good starting point.
Yeah, well, Biden was horrible, and I think a lot of, especially the anti-genocide in Israel people, are kind of realizing that both sides are really horrible, and I think that's a kind of a litmus test for people's stance on the military-industrial complex, American imperialism through Israel. So we kind of see they're both on the same side. I personally don't think Biden won the election. I think Trump is a jerk, but he's a populist, and lots of people like him. And I think Kamala Harris was pretty horrible. And I think it was horrible that there was no Democratic primary, not even a chance for people to run like a progressive candidate, an anti-war candidate to have those issues come in. But I mean, first 2 years of Biden was COVID. I think they went really too far, too woke without really being, anti-war, pro-poor people. So they wanted like transgender CEOs and transgender generals rather than transgenders and cisgenders and straight and black and white, all people, who have economic factors that really factor their lives. They all went down, but they have gave these kind of token gestures to marginalized communities while still oppressing, the most marginalized community, which is poor people. And it's really interesting to see Trump kind of, go after the quote unquote conspiracy theorists, especially now with Israel. So I'm seeing a lot of backlash against Trump because of the Israel support, and the people who thought Epstein didn't kill himself and that Trump was the good guy in the Epstein thing, and he was trying to take Epstein out. I think they're realizing now that Epstein and the Mossad in Israel probably had some dirt on Trump because he's very rational. I love what he did with Zelensky. I love how he treated Zelensky. I wish he would have treated Netanyahu like that. But I think you're gonna face a real backlash. I think people project onto the leaders that they want to see their own ideas. And I think we kind of now seem like, Trump isn't draining the swamp. He's putting Marco Rubio and neocons in all these positions. He's even more pro-Israel than Biden. So I think that his kind of reaching out to the quote unquote conspiracy crowd, I think was just a total business move. I think, we've seen the release of the JFK files, and I've looked through them a little bit, and I've also checked out a lot of trusted journalists and see what they had to say, and it's a pretty much a nothing burger to me. And I've seen a lot of people, focus on Israel because I guess Israel is kind of the bad guy right now. But there's so many other elements beyond Israel that people have been ignoring, like big oil, military-industrial complex, the anti-Castro Cubans, the CIA itself, and in many ways, the Israel is a byproduct of the CIA. I was watching Candace Owens the other day, and she was talking about how Israeli intelligence agents were blackmailing the Dulles brothers and the Rockefellers because of the business dealings they were doing with the Nazis. And it actually came up in my own research when I was researching Meyer Lansky. I found myself reading about James Jesus Engelke, who's a infamous CIA figure who was also the CIA Mossad liaison, and he was a notorious anti-Semite before he became the CIA Mossad liaison. But I was reading a book, I think it was called, The War Against the Jews. And in the book, they were saying that James Jesus Engelke was also blackmailed by the Mossad. And it was always something I really worried. I'm like, if the CIA and the Mossad and American Israel are such good friends, why was there no retribution for the CIA harboring so many Nazis like Klaus Barbie, Joseph Mengele, Eichmann, and they were all part of like a CIA Nazi rat line from Europe to South America. And so what I'm finding out now is there was kind of a deal brokered between the CIA and the Mossad. And it's, hey, if you let us fight against these Arabs, help us fight against the Arabs, we won't blow you guys up for working with the Nazis. So you have a kind of half blackmail, half negotiation deal where the CIA got to not have their Nazi collaborations exposed, and Israel got to get the CIA's help, and even some former Nazis' help. There's a guy by the name of Otto Skorzeny who was a notorious Nazi, and he actually wound up working with the Mossad to take out scientists in Egypt. So I know there's a few tangents there, but yeah, no, Trump is a loser, man. Even me, sometimes I had a little bit of a faith in that, at least something different can't get any worse. But I think it might be able to get worse, especially in Israel with the position Trump's taking. And what's really horrible, I'm a Columbia University graduate and a veteran of the protests there, and we took over a building, the same building that the anti-genocide protesters took over last year, Hamilton Hall. And we were there for a week, and we had parties and we had fun. And I would talk to security. I'm like, "Yo, what's going on? They're gonna raid us?" He's like, "Nah, no, they're not gonna raid you." And we had a nice little negotiation. Now there's an ethnic studies program at Columbia because I don't think, honestly, when you look at the history of protests in Columbia, obviously in the 60s, you had the massive protests against the Vietnam War. And then in the 80s, you had massive anti-apartheid protests. And then today we're having these anti-Israeli genocide protests. And, my little ethnic studies protest kind of dims in comparison to these real issues these young people are going through. And it's crazy to see people not only expelled, but deported, which was like, when we were, I didn't even feel, there's nothing on my academic record for taking over a school building. It was fun. I never faked any retribution. I never was sent to timeout. But now these students who did the same thing, and I think they only had Hamilton Hall for a day. We had it for a week. And, I think maybe one or two student leaders might have been punished. No one was suspended. No one was expelled. There might have been some disciplinary hearings, but I think it shows like what's a real threat to the system, because now Trump is withdrawing federal funding from Columbia. We've had the student who's been deported, and there's another South Korean student who also has a green card, and they're trying to deport her as well. So the times are very interesting right now. The times are the change, in the words of Bob Dylan. But I do feel the one good thing about Trump being in office is that you can have an honest lefty protest against the whole government. And rather than, oh no, but Kamala, we need to support Kamala because if not Trump, now we have Trump, right? So let's go full on. Hopefully this will kind of really unite the left into an anti-war movement, which it hasn't been. It's been very much an identity politics movement under Biden, where you take, little token gestures while ignoring issues like war and poverty.
I wanted to ask you about that actually, going back to Colombia with the Vietnam and the apartheid protests specifically. I mean, doesn't Colombia and a lot of universities like that like actually sort of retroactively take a lot of pride in the fact that these protest movements took place at their university and they sort of retroactively like take credit for the fact that these movements were happening. And that's something that was so crazy to me watching not under Trump, but under Biden, the crackdown, because people forget really quickly that the crackdown was happening under Biden and that paved the way for Trump. I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on that of just that, like this history repeating itself over at a university that, again, would brag about having its students, take over a building like you did or like they did in the 60s or the 90s?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I was part of the Black Students Organization at Columbia, and they had something called the Malcolm X Lounge, and it was formerly the ROTC office. And the Black students there took it over, and now it's part of Columbia's tradition as a Black student organization headquarters. And I think it's in a way history. Like if you look at the history of the Vietnam War, there's not too many people saying, "Oh man, we should have won harder in Vietnam," and apartheid. So these are two things where history is on the side of the protesters. And I don't think Colombia at the time were on the right side of history, but now they want to act like they're on the right side of history. And I think in the same way, I think we will see years later that history will be on the side of the anti-Israeli genocide protesters. And it's really crazy and hypocritical. And, Colombia has a very high Jewish population, but also a large percent of their Jewish population is protesting. But I think it's the moneyed interests. Like I think a lot of the anti-war, anti-poverty Jewish people I know, they don't go into big business and donate to Columbia. They become social workers, they become teachers, professors, activists, lawyers, who might not have the same economic clout as the Zionists, who tend to be from, business backgrounds. So I think definitely the influence of the not only the federal government but Columbia's donors. Like I went to school with Robert Kraft, who owns the Patriots. His niece lived right next door to me, and she, real charming person. But her uncle has definitely been, and I'm a Patriots fan too. Thank God they suck now, so I don't have to root for them. But Bob Kraft has been a big supporter of Zionism in Israel and the IDF, and it's been sad, and I understand, and I think we really see how identity politics goes wrong in Israel when people, and it's understand like I think a lot of people I used to consider myself pro-black, because you're come from a oppressed group and you need to stand up for yourself. But as I kind of move on, I think I need to be pro-righteousness, pro-poor people, because I think a lot of Jewish people consider themselves pro-Jewish, never again because of what happened in the Holocaust. But it's rather than being anti-Holocaust and anti-genocide, they're pro-Jewish. So if Jewish people are committing a genocide, it's okay for them. So I think I think history is and I feel bad about how this will be a stain on the legacy of Jewish people, because I've known so many great Jewish teachers, great Jewish musicians like Bob Dylan, Jewish activists, lawyers, Jewish social workers, Jewish protesters. My mother's friend, kind of like an aunt to me. She's a big part of Jewish Voices for Peace in Boston, and I was going to I was protesting Israeli genocide before it was kind of chic, or was kind of trendy thing to do, because it's not anything too new. It's been going on. Some people say 1948. People say before that. But right now, I think post October 7th, you've definitely seen a big escalation in, especially the number of children being killed, which is just horrible. And it's like they're saying Hamas is using human shields. That's like if you have a police officer who lives in your building and you get bombed, you could say, "Oh, the NYPD is using human shields." No, there's no army. There's no army in the West Bank or Gaza. The people who do fight, they live amongst the people, and that does not justify killing children because they happen to live near people who are opposed to Israel. And even when you do look at Hamas, people, when I see a lot of times when people protest Israel and they go, "Do you support Hamas? Do you support Hamas?" I'm like, no, but you know who does? Benjamin Netanyahu. He funded Hamas because he needed that boogeyman to justify the destruction and genocide. Before, you had someone like Yasser Arafat, who, maybe not the most perfect person, but he was willing to negotiate, go to the table. He had support from people like Fidel Castro and Nelson Mandela. So it's interesting, and I'm really optimistic about this generation, and really hope they could expand their anti-war views beyond Israel and bring it to Haiti and the Sudan, and not just focus on Israel, because Israel, in my view, is just one part of the American military-industrial complex. And I think a lot of people might not know what's going on in the Congo. They might just see it as black people killing black people, when in fact it's CIA supported tribalism, where the CIA and the American government will support one tribe and one group or one country and have them oppress and kill the other country for things like coltan, which is we need for our phones and people need for their Tesla batteries. So I'm very optimistic about this generation, and I hope they'll expand their anti-war, anti-military views to America,
Mhm.
who fights a lot of covert wars, and even places like Saudi Arabia, who's been bombing Yemen. I think the journalist just revealed that he was on a text exchange with all these high up government officials by accident, where they're talking about their plans to bomb Yemen. And Yemen has been victims of their own genocide, mostly from Saudi Arabia, for the past 10 odd years, and now the Yemeni people have been brave, especially the Houthis, in terms of being one of the few groups in the Middle East to actually stand up and fight against Israel militarily.
Because you gotta ask, just because I don't know, it was a triggering moment for me when I saw that Jeffrey Goldberg published this, alleged leaked text about the plans to bomb Yemen. Just given that it is coming from Goldberg, famously, Iraq War propagandist, and then also of the Russian bounty
ID,
stories. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
IDF soldier or
Yeah, yeah.
IDF prison guard, right? Yeah.
To me, it just seems like the an intentional leak, to further that war. But I don't know. I want to get your opinion on it because, well, hold on. Let me just say this real quick. If not an intentional leak, obviously it's meant to embarrass them, the Trump administration, and they want someone more respectable bombing other countries. But that's my takeaway. What are your thoughts?
it's interesting. I saw the defense secretary talk about it, and he did talk about how Goldberg was, behind the Russia hoax, the, find people on both sides, hoax, all these kind of things where, Trump is a bad person, but he's definitely been unfairly demonized, and he is a demon, but he's been overly demonized by the quote unquote lefty deep state media. So I really do think that these people are incompetent enough to add a journalist on their text. There might have been another Goldberg, who might have been some neocon, and they just put him on there. So I'm not above that. I'm not above believing that it's a real situation, but obviously it has been weaponized against Trump, and obviously hypocritically weaponized, because I'm sure if this same guy got the text from Biden, he wouldn't have released them. He would have, he would have just kept it within the kind of Democrat deep state family.
Mhm.
But we'll see, man. It's a real shame that these are the only options we have, are the kind of these deep state neocon media, and then the Trump supporting neocon media. It's a shame we don't have powerful independent voices in the media that could, well, we do, but they're not amplified to the level of publications like the Atlantic or Fox News. So I think it's real, and I have a certain faith in American journalism, that they're propagandists, but they don't really necessarily lie. They just leave out a lot of truth. So
Hmm.
I don't think he's making it up, right? But I do think he's obviously leaving out a lot of other stuff. I would like to see the same guy criticize Trump for Israel actions, and he might have even been on the Israel chain, but he wouldn't release that because that falls in line with his view. So I mean, we've had, the one good thing about Trump, I guess, is ending the war in Ukraine, and he had an idea that he was flushing out that I thought was an amazing idea, and I would have liked to see a lot of people on the left get behind it, which was you make a deal with Russia and China, and say, hey, we're all going to reduce our military budget by 50%. You don't have to worry about us. We don't have to worry about you. And the military budget is like, 51% of American taxpayers are spending money. So imagine how many social programs, like all the little stuff they're cutting with DOGE, which I'm glad they're cutting USAID, but everything else I don't know. But imagine how many schools you could build. Imagine how many houses you could build for people. Imagine what you could do if you were to slash the American military budget by 50%. Like that would be like everybody could have their way. All the libertarians who don't want to be taxed, you don't have to be taxed. The progressives who want more money for social programs can get more money for social programs. But no, none of them are really attacking the military. So that's one good thing that I've seen Trump do, is make that proposal, and hopefully you can extend it to Israel too, and hopefully that, if you slash their military budget by 50%.
I want to go back to something you said about the media that I thought was really, really strong, which is, they don't necessarily lie, but they leave a lot out. And something that's
Exactly.
with the recent report on Israel is, and you said this even, that, Netanyahu needed the boogeyman of Hamas. And that's even been reported by the New York Times now, which is a large omission, just given that they're an agenda-setting newspaper, right? I'm just wondering, and this is a long way to get to the question, is under Trump, do you feel like there's this new avenue for more candid reporting? If that makes sense. I can try to elaborate more, but I'll leave it there.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think that MSNBC is changing. I think what I have seen is the rise of, independent media. People like Candace Owens, who a lot of people might demonize for, aligning herself with right-wing causes. She's been very, very anti-Israeli genocide. And she has a huge platform. I think it's like a top ten podcast. So what I really think is that soon people will see, like, I think people on the left, and this is why you had Sun MSNBC kind of have like abandoned MSNBC and realized that they're bull. And then people on the right, especially, so people on the anti-war left and anti-war right are now seeing like how horrible Fox News is. They're seeing Fox News is still being pro-war. They're still seeing MSNBC as being pro-war. So I would love to see the anti-war left and the anti-war right unite under the common goal of stop, babies being killed, stop money being wasted, whatever your motivation is for stopping war. So I think it's been a trend that I think they've been trying to shut down. Like, you have this new Midas touch, like Democratic propaganda podcast, which
Yeah.
they're claiming is like the most popular podcast. I don't know anyone who listens to it, but you might have some fans, but I think that the way of kind of, partisan politics, where you have MSNBC being cheerleaders for the Democrats and then Fox News being cheerleaders for the Republicans, and no real media outlets criticizing them when they work together, because the Democrats and Republicans work together when it comes to war, taxes, big business, etc. And there isn't really an independent outlet that criticizes both Democrats and Republicans. Like, if you want a job in media, you have to either you could say Trump is horrible, Trump is the devil. Yeah, they'll throw you on MSNBC. You could say Biden is corrupt, Biden has dementia. You can say all that stuff. They'll throw you on Fox News. But if you say, yeah, Biden has dementia, the Democrats are using identity politics, and the Republicans are warmongering neocons, you're not going to find yourself on any media outlets.
Even the
I
young
found that even the Young Turks, yeah.
Even
I
the
found
Young
that
Turks.
yeah. I found that funny. We were talking about the Luigi case a couple weeks ago on the show, and one of my favorite backlashes that came from that was against Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh, because they were really full-throatedly coming out that oh, you should not be cheering on the death of this poor family man, and this guy's a criminal and all of that. And then that's continued now with them just continuing their support of Israel. And I've loved watching fans of the Daily Wire actually turn on Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh, and kind of, I've seen on Instagram like reels of people's comments of going, oh, I see what you're doing. You're just trying to turn us against, you're just trying to turn poor people against each other. Do you think that's part of like a
Yeah.
shift change that's happening? I feel like all of that, like the connection with the Gen Z becoming more anti-war, and then also sort of this fractioning of the MAGA movement and what you're talking about with anti-war left, anti-war right. Do you think that's all of a piece? Like, do you think that's all kind of the same thing?
Well, it's interesting because, I'm an active TikTok scroller. And, I remember obviously they're trying to get it banned because A, it is a voice for millennials and younger people who are way more anti-war, especially anti-Israeli genocide war, than, people of my generation and the older baby boomers. And it's interesting because right after they banned TikTok, I couldn't find any like pro-Palestinian, anti-genocide content for a while. But now the algorithm has shifted where it's like, 9 out of 10 posts might be anti-Israeli genocide posts. So I do think there is a shift that's going on among young people. And I think young people aren't my dad is, and I think a lot of people's dads, they just sit and watch MSNBC and Fox News, and that's how they kind of digest their information and develop their opinions. But this new generation, they don't care about Fox News or MSNBC, even if they are on the left or they support Trump, or if they're on the right and they support Trump, or on the left and support whoever, Biden, Bernie Sanders. They are not dwelling into those same New York Post, New York Times. They're not taking these traditional Operation Mockingbird CIA outlets as their sources for information, and you can get on the ground information, through social media. And even with Elon Musk and Twitter, as awful as he is, and he does promote himself a lot, and other than like fight videos, at least I see on my Twitter feed, I see a lot of anti-war content. I see even anti-Musk content on there. So I think, and I know a lot of people might have left Twitter or X for Blue Sky or other places, where I think it's not good to be in an echo chamber. I think it's good to see voices on on all sides of the political spectrum, whether they be libertarians, neocons. Even if I despise these people's views, I want to know what they're saying, because these people are influenced and very influential. So I try and stay out of the echo chamber of people who think like me, and I think there are a lot of people who will have a civil debate with you. And I think like what the Democrats, a lot of people like Joy Reid were telling people, like, if you're a father or your uncle's a Trump supporter, don't visit him on Thanksgiving, which I think is horrible, because when you look at it, like Trump and Obama are joking around, like they hang out, but they want the families to fight, like, which I think is pretty bad.
I noticed that change in the algorithm as well when it comes to a lot of the content that was coming out of Gaza, which was really strange because sometime I would say probably in the lead up to the election, which might be purposeful, but I thought it was really hard to find content coming out of Gaza. But now I do feel like it's come back, especially on X or Twitter, which has been surprising, and then also on Instagram. And I know they have certain policies regarding elections, whatever. But anyways, I wanted to ask about Candace Owens because she's come up a few times
Yeah.
in conversations, and I feel like my filtered opinion about Candace Owens is negative, right? Like even though she's had like Norm Finkelstein on, right? But like she's basically been
Mhm.
labeled an anti-Semite, and the quotes that I see are pretty rough when it comes to that label, and pretty accurate, it seems, when it comes to that label. But would love to get your take, and also just because they seem to be friends, if you have any thoughts on Kanye's personality lately.
Oh man, Kanye is horrible. Kanye is definitely anti-Semitic. He might even be a plot to like show, there's anti-Semites out there. But what he's saying is just, and he's doing everything but protest the Israel war. Like, he's not protesting the war there. He's just saying, he's just throwing up swastikas and wearing KKK outfits. So I try not to think about Kanye. I miss the old Kanye, like his songs.
Mhm.
But I'm a bit of a Candace Owens fan in that I watch her. I don't agree with all of her opinions, but there are some opinions. She's been at the forefront of the JFK assassination. She's been touting Tim O'Neill's Chaos book, which is, kind of just scratches the surface on the CIA. And she has had interesting guests on. She's had Breonna Gray Joy, who's one of my favorite journalists, on, and Breonna Gray Joy was fired from
The
The
Hill.
Hill.
Rising.
It's like Candace
Yeah.
Owens was fired from the Daily Wire for expressing the same opinion. So we kind of see how, and I guess the Hill is maybe. I liked them when they had Crystal and Sagar. I really liked Breonna Gray Joy with the dorky libertarian they had on. I thought they had great chemistry, and I think she does really well with pushback. And I like her by herself, but I think it's really good that people can have different ideas and different philosophies, and have discussions on that. And you don't really see that too much. But Candace, and she will criticize Trump. I think she's definitely part of the Christian right. Some of her criticisms of Black Lives Matter, I think, were definitely legitimate and were kind of shown to happen in real life, especially with the mansions and the money. But I definitely see some. I won't say, and I think there is it's a bad sentiment in the Black community, where if you stray from the pro-democratic, um, pro-Obama, pro-Biden, camp, and if you dare become like a Republican, you're some type of sellout or Uncle Tom, or you're not black, as if there is a gene in black people that makes them predisposed to voting Democrat. So I think Candace is entertaining. I watch her just like I think, like I think Tucker Carlson's entertaining. I disagree with him a lot of stuff, but there are stuff that I do agree with Candace and Tucker on, in terms of highlighting the JFK assassination, which I think is a big litmus test. I think Ben Shapiro just posted an article that said why it doesn't matter who shot JFK. What? It doesn't
That was
matter.
ridiculous. I couldn't believe that.
It
That
doesn't
was
matter.
that when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, Israel definitely did it then, and Ben knows about it.
Well, Israel had a part of it. I don't think they should. I know they're the boogeyman right now, but I think they were a part of it. Just like Texas Oil was a part of it. Just like the mafia was a part of it. There were so many components, and to highlight one and ignore the rest. But yeah, he definitely is trying to hide Israel's role. But he's also just a neocon. He's not just
Yep.
pro-Israeli. He's also a right-wing Republican supporter of the military-industrial complex. And if you look at it, that's really who did it. And the Israel obviously kind of joined the military-industrial complex. They kind of joined the deep state through CIA people like James Jesus Angleton and Alan Dulles. And it's even said that Benjamin Netanyahu was some type of CIA or FBI agent. So it's I think a lot of people might try and demonize Israel and say Israel is controlling America, when America is controlling Israel, which allows them to also control America. Not America as a whole, but the deep state controls or works with Israel, and then they blackmail American politicians, so they have control over America, not just the Jewish people, or not Jewish people at all, but not just Israel. And Israel has their own deep state, and a lot of the people are being propagandized, just like American people are being propagandized. And um, obviously, they don't have to deal with anything close to the horrors that people deal with in Gaza, but they do deal with, threats of terrorism, kidnapping, which are, drastically overhyped, stuff that we don't necessarily have to deal with in the United States, post 9/11. So yeah, no, Ben Shapiro's a big jerk. It was probably, yeah, a little bit on. I think that's a little bit about Israel, but I also think that's just him being a deep state cover Operation Mockingbird guy.
Okay, so this
Yeah,
has come
I
up.
could see that.
This has come up a few times in the conversation. I'm just interested in your kind of journey when it comes to the identity politics movement. And you even said it before. It's like it's not that you're not pro-black anymore, but that you just feel like you need to also kind of encompass, pro-poor people and, really widen pro-righteousness even. I want to talk about just how you made that change and really your thoughts on it in the political sphere.
Well, I was a big pro-Obama fan, and a lot of that was direct identity politics. Not only, I consider myself African American, but I'm also biracial. My mother is from South Africa, and she was white. She was an anti-apartheid activist who was kicked out of South Africa. My father was a Jamaican math scholar. And to see someone like Obama, who is biracial, who also allegedly attended Columbia University. I'm not too sure Obama attended Columbia University in the same way I did. He might have been like a foreign exchange student, which allowed the CIA to put him in Pakistan or wherever he really was. But he wasn't a Columbia student like me, hanging out in the quad, playing basketball in the gym, drinking at the bars. He wasn't, he never lived on campus even when he was in New York. But I was a huge Obama fan, and I wrote for a Black news website called News One, and I spent a lot of time attacking like Fox News and Rush Limbaugh and defending Obama and the Democrats. And like I said before, I think when you see Israel, like hypothetically, if black people are, given reparations and a nuclear bomb, and they have Montana, and they start killing all the white people in Nebraska, I won't be like, yeah, that's good just because I'm pro-black. I still have to be anti-war. And just in general, when you look at the world in itself, like I think what they try and make you do with identity politics is if you're pro-black, so you have to vote for Kamala, so you have to vote for someone doesn't have your interests at heart at all. And I think that's the kind of way Democrats manipulate people, and it's a good way to divide people too. If you look at it, that's why I think when you had the dominant movement of the early 2010s was Occupy Wall Street, which was the 99% against the 1%. And this is kind of why I agree with Candace Owens on Black Lives Matter, is that became an identity politics, because there are lots of poor white people who get killed by police. The determining factor of you getting killed by the police isn't necessarily your skin color, but it's your income rate. And I think a lot of the problems that Black people do have, whether it be mass incarceration, whether it be low education, whether it be gun violence, they actually are not necessarily directly a result of race, even though obviously race plays a big role in terms of the fact why African Americans are poor. But obviously poverty is the big determining factor of, who's in jail. When you look at who's in jail, the people say, oh, the jails are 50% Black and Black people only 12% of the population. But if you look at, in terms of the poor population, Black people make up a high rank. And if you look at all the white people in jail, they're all poor too. If you look at all the Latinos in jail, they're poor. So poverty is a determining factor in terms of who goes to jail, who becomes a victim of gun crime and all these things. So I feel like, someone I really admired was Fred Hampton. And Fred Hampton was the Black Panther leader in Chicago, and he was making outreach to groups like the American Patriots, like the Young Lords, and he started a rainbow coalition of radical groups. He was dealing with, he's dealing with SDS, Students for a Democratic Society. They were working together, and the FBI through COINTELPRO were really trying to divide Fred Hampton from even working with groups like the SDS. So they send fake letters and to the SDS from Fred Hampton. They, try and make Black people racist against white people and not work with them. So I'm always going to be, very culturally pro-Black. I love Black culture. I know I'm not knocking anyone else's culture. I love Italians, the Irish. I have friends everywhere. Jewish culture is great too. Big fan of Jewish comedy. But I feel that politically, people just voting for someone who's the same skin color, and this is kind of what I've seen is the post-60s. J. Edgar Hoover says there will never be another Black Messiah unless we create one. And so if you look at the Black leaders of the 60s, you had Fred Hampton, like I said, who was amazing. You had Malcolm X, who I think originally he was the perfect boogeyman for them. When he was saying the white man was the devil, they were, yeah, because they put him on 60 Minutes and they get white people afraid of Black people. When he goes to Mecca and he sees that, the white man isn't the devil, and that the devil mentality is not based on skin color, but ideology, and then he splits with the Nation of Islam, that's when they kill him. Martin Luther King was fine when he was preaching integration. They're like, all right, whatever, you can use that water fountain. All right, you can use that bathroom. All right, cool. March on Washington, do you? But the minute he starts protesting against the war and the minute he starts fighting for workers' rights, they had to kill him. So I really think that, I think, people should always be proud of their cultures and should promote their cultures. But I think in terms of voting politically on gender or race lines, is ridiculous. Like if you look at, Hillary Clinton, you got to vote for her because you're a woman when she's responsible for the death of millions of women through war, when she's responsible for, millions of impoverished women all over the world and in the United States through her policies. So I think identity politics, should be taken out of politics. I think that people should vote in on interest. Like we saw with Bernie Sanders when he was running both against Hillary and Biden, when just because Biden was Obama's VP or Hillary was Bill's wife and Bill was a Black president, all these people, you didn't really see the support for Bernie Sanders from the Black community. And that's why, they say Biden won, because he had the whole Black vote in South Carolina, which I don't necessarily believe. I think he probably cheated Bernie in South Carolina with a bunch of dead Black votes, which he might have used to cheat Trump too. But rather than, Black people saying, hey, Bernie is going to give us these programs that are going to give us better education, better, afterworks programs, more social programs, better healthcare, they're thinking, I need to vote for Hillary because she's more connected to Blackness through Bill being Black, or all these Black politicians endorsing her. that, you had a population voting for someone who wasn't necessarily even black, but because of her getting, endorsements from black celebrities and black politicians, she became the de facto choice of black America. And same with Biden, who was a horrible racist who created the crime bill. He was, buddy with Strom Thurmond, who's maybe one of the most notorious racist politicians ever to grace the U.S. Senate, if not both Congress too. But then, black people are told when they see other black politicians endorsing him and black politicians supporting him, and then he goes on TV and tells Charlemagne, if you don't vote for me, you're not black, which is the most horrid result of identity politics, where you can be stripped of your identity because you don't have a certain political viewpoint.
That was totally
Yeah,
a
that,
loaded line, right? Like he knew he was going into like the Breakfast Club, and he's like, "All right, this will get him right." I mean, that had to be prepared, right? That wasn't off the
I
cuff, right?
I don't know. I wonder about that because, like, we know that his descent into senility was already happening, I think. And I think one of the things that was refreshing, the only thing really that was refreshing about the final years of Biden to me was that he would say the quiet part out loud in the same way that Trump often does. So
Yeah.
he would kind of say it like it really was. Yeah, it probably was a loaded line, but I also part of me thinks that that was just a Biden slip of him saying exactly what you're saying.
Biden saying the quiet part out loud. He would do it in that whisper voice. You remember you mentioned that?
I just want to ask Casey, because you were just talking about Bernie Sanders, and I think you were probably in the same boat as Dan and I. At the time, 2016, 2020, he really seemed like a great hope for leftist politics. And it really hurt me, especially after 2020, because I was very, very depressed when he got, I think, kneecapped out of the race because it really felt like that was the last chance. And then obviously since then, what does Bernie do the second that he's kneecapped is he goes back to telling everyone vote for Democrats. Refusing to use the word genocide, saying you have to vote for Biden, then you have to vote for Kamala. I wonder, what is your take on this new fight the oligarchy
Hmm.
campaign that he's doing with AOC right now? Because for me, I really don't like it, and I really feel like it's a way to kind of sweep up people who were Harris or Biden voters who feel disenfranchised and want to cling on to something. And while it's like using some of the right words, it comes off to me as really, really cynical and really disingenuous. And it also will reach a logical conclusion of 2028 vote for Pete Buttigieg or Gavin Newsom. I
Yeah.
was just wondering if you have any thoughts on this dog and pony show, is what I call it.
Yeah.
I don't know
So
what you would call it.
yeah, it's interesting. I would, if they were to, fight the oligarchy before, when Biden was Biden, even though Elon Musk is a terrible billionaire with an awful influence on American politics, so are people like Ron Burkle, George Soros, Ed Buck, who, who got caught trying to kill gay black homeless men by injecting them with meth and was a huge kind of Democratic donor. So you're fighting an oligarchy when it's right wing, but not when it's left wing, when you have the same impact of money on politics. And I really wish Bernie Sanders would have been more like Trump. And then, at the DNC, I wish they would have stormed the Capitol or done something similar. I wish people on the left would have had the balls to, storm the DNC in 2016 or 2020, because I do believe that, if we've seen everything from, Gwen Ifill giving Hillary the questions to these kind of super delegates, and the whole primary process is really not very democratic at all. And we've seen how that happened to Bernie, in that it's kind of really controlled. And even this year, when there was no Democratic primary at all, like we weren't even given an option to say, hey, I'm a Democrat, but I'm anti-war, I'm pro-poor people. You weren't even given the Bernie option this year. You were just saying Kamala, she's the only option. If you don't vote for her, you're sexist or racist. Never mind her politics. Don't worry about that. Trump's horrible. If you don't vote for her, it's going to be your fault that we get Trump, even though we didn't even give the left a chance to even try and argue a point or even have a dialogue. Because I think that's a good thing that happens with the presidential campaigns. You have debates over war. You have debates over taxes. But with no Democratic primary, there was no debate over war or taxes. And it was kind of like That's more of an oligarchy for me when you're only given two choices and you have no, if you're a Democrat, you have no input on either choice. You had no input on Kamala being at least Trump ran the primary, but if you're a Democrat or on the left and you don't want to vote for Republicans, you had no input. Your vote had no input, and you were just given Kamala or Trump. Those were the only choices. The only That's like saying, having a buffet with just um, a burger and a hot dog, right? It's not really a buffet if you only have a choice between two foods, and that's what they're kind of giving people. And at least Trump has populism behind him. At least he does, for whatever wrong reasons. He does have a working class support, and I think it's good marketing on his chance. He's a good businessman. He understands what it takes to kind of sell a campaign, and he understands his target market. And I don't think the Democrats do anymore.
Just to emphasize that point, I think the debate was a good one, if only because people can get pushed, presumably for leftism, which is something
Hmm.
I would sympathize with. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. And something we talk about this on the show a lot is, within these first couple months of Trump, like if I'm a Trump supporter, I'm excited right now. I'm loving this right now. I mean, he's following through on campaign promises. I do think there will be some reality setting in at some point. But I wanted to ask you, how, if you're a Trump supporter right now, are you excited, and do you think that the balloon will deflate at some point? And what would that be if?
There's a strong diaspora of Trump supporters. A lot of Trump supporters were anti-Israel war, and I think they're being very disheartened right now. I think there are. We've even seen the kind of fracturism between like JD Vance and Elon Musk. He's followed through on the anti-immigrant stuff. If you voted for Trump off, the immigration policy, you're probably happy. If you voted for him, this is the horrible it's a horrible situation when you can say, well, at least Biden had two wars going. He had Ukraine and Israel, and Trump's just keeping one going, even though the looming war with China is very scary, that I think they're kind of gearing up to. So you have, the Democrats who want to fight Russia and the Republicans who want to fight China. And I think China is, going to be the inevitable winner anyways. They're kicking ass with technology. They have a large population, and what they're doing globally is rather than trying to take over countries and install their own regimes, they're just making business deals to say, hey, we'll help you build these roads, you give us this, you give us that, boom, we won't meddle in your politics, rather than the USA, who will you know will say, all right, we'll help you here, and then they send in someone like USAID, and then once they bring in USAID, they have the little spy who leads the coup, and then your government's overthrown. But I mean, it's tough to say. I think with Trump's approval rating, I think that the people who kind of blindly support him, his uneducated followers who will just listen to what they say, I think they're probably happy. I think he also has a big neocon support. I think they're happy, especially with Israel. But I do think a large segment of people who voted for Trump were people who were disenfranchised by Democrats and traditional Republicans and wanted to try something new. And I think right now they're realizing that he isn't new at all in terms of especially his Israel policy. But we'll see in the future. Again, like I said, if he could reduce the military budgets and if we could get some support from Democrats to say, hey, why don't we do that? And I think that would be great. And it would be horrible if the Israel war continues. But there's lots of wars, man. If we could end some of them, but I do still at the same time, I think Israel is a very good litmus test for people's views on wars, genocide, and the military industrial complex. But I think a lot of people really don't understand that when we say we just gave 10 billion to Israel. No, we gave $10 million to our defense contractors, and then they gave $5 billion worth of weapons to Israel and kept $5 billion for themselves.
The same with Ukraine. Yeah, it's
Yeah, exactly.
Mike Johnson was getting a lot of heat for not passing the Ukraine bill last summer, I think. And there's a quote from him. I can't believe I didn't screenshot it or link it someplace. I can't find it right now, but he said, and Biden has done this too, the majority of the money appropriated in this bill just is used at home to support the,
Mhm.
which yeah, it's something kind of overlooked purposely. We've covered a lot of topics in this conversation, and I'm just curious, how did you get into this? And I'll just say, because you and I met doing an apprenticeship with Russ Baker, which was great. It was great getting to know you then, but I would just love to hear a little bit about your background and how you got into politics and radicalized.
So I guess, I went to Columbia University and, I was a political science major there. And they didn't really tell me what I needed to know, but they told me how to research. So I always knew how to research. I always knew how to find stuff in books. I always knew how to find like documents. I was using search engines and for college papers before people were really doing that. And had a little bit of a rap career, and the rap career ended up as my career in journalism. And then, like I said, in journalism, when I was News One, I worked for a black news website, very pro-Obama, very anti-Fox News, very anti-Republican. And it was when I started, when I left there, I got the offer I wrote an article about, the CIA in Jamaica in 1976. And, I did a lot of research for that. And so when I left News One, I was given the opportunity to write a book on the CIA in Jamaica. And then that's kind of when I realized like wasn't too aware of a deep state or how influential the CIA was. And through that, I started, met journalists like Russ Baker. I would go on shows like the Oppenheimer Report, and I would find a whole new sphere of people who I might have thought were kooky conspiracists, who now I realize were legitimate journalists. Like, and then the mainstream media, like I was always a reader of the New York Times. I would watch Meet the Press. I would watch MSNBC. So I thought that was real journalism. And I thought those Alex Jones types who, talking about 9/11 this, 9/11 that, they were just crazy paranoid kooks. But then, when I, did my own research, which is really what I trust, I trust my own research. I don't necessarily trust journalist A or journalist B. Like, no matter what they say, I have to find out myself, because I've been led astray so many times by so many people. So yeah, no, working with Russ was great. He's an amazing journalist. That was like, we got a journalism degree for free pretty much. So yeah, working with him there and just kind of, I was a huge Obama fan, and then, finding out about Obama and really looking at what he did in retrospect in terms of what he did to Syria, what he did to Libya, and how horrible it was and how he wasn't that much different from Bush, and he bombed more countries than Bush. So my kind of pro-Black Democrat ideology kind of began to fade away off being kind of disenfranchised from Obama. I turned off from Obama, and just kind of looking at stuff from a perspective of, knowing that the CIA killed JFK and that we have a deep state that kind of controls politics, that we don't really have the influence on choosing our leaders. And we have a military industrial complex that chooses our leaders that needs to keep the war machine going. So I'm, basically cynical of any Democrat or Republican, rather than before when I were like, the Republicans are the bad guys, the Democrats are the good guys. Now I see, they're both the bad guys, and it's just a kind of two-headed snake with a very sophisticated divide and conquer strategy that keeps working class Black people mad at working class white people mad at working class immigrants, and no one's mad at people who do things like NAFTA, which, sends all the jobs away. They blame the Mexicans. No, the Black people aren't mad at Joe Biden and Bill Clinton for mass incarceration. They're mad at, a kooky Republican who said the N-word. The working class white people are mad at the one story of the immigrant who killed a girl, rather than the fentanyl epidemic, which is killing thousands of white people. So once I kind of saw like the divide and conquer tactics that were being used by the media, I try and, kind of stay away from them, and always do your own research, which is like they like during COVID, that was like a horrible thing. You must be so stupid. You do your own research. Why don't you listen to the doctor? I'm like, well, doctors told us cigarettes were great. They told us opioids were great, and a couple epidemics and 1 million plus people dead after that. Now we see post COVID, a lot of the stuff. I didn't take the vaccine despite the media pressure and peer pressure. So I just really feel I have to kind of like think for myself, and I always look at both sides. And a lot of times there's more than both sides. There's not just the Democrat side and the Republican side. There is a Democratic Socialist side, a communist side, a libertarian side, and just a side that sees the truth, a side that's that's rational, that sees that both sides are lying. So it's been a journey now. I'm still evolving politically, and it's hard to position where I am right now. And all the things that made me think that I was a leftist, that my mother was, being anti-war, anti-poverty, pro-jobs for poor people, pro-social programs, those things that made me align myself with the Democrats in the 90s are all kind of gone away now, and it's kind of replaced by even black men kind of got skipped over. Like, all right, no, you need to be a transgender black woman with a disability. You don't count anymore. It's like, well, what? No, you're the patriarchy, male privilege, and when I see male privilege, I see I see homeless people are predominantly male. I see people incarcerated are predominantly male. I see people who commit suicide are predominantly male. People who are killed in gun violence are predominantly male. And I think people mistake classism for the patriarchy. Yeah, we do have a lot of male CEOs. We do. But those are rich people, right? Those aren't just poor working class people. That's not a patriarchy, that's a classist system where you have rich white males controlling politics, business, entertainment, etc. That's not necessarily a patriarchal thing or even a racist thing. It's a classist thing, and we have we have an elitist class which has kept their power and kept their influence by dividing and conquering people along lines of gender, along lines of race, along lines of religion, region, etc.
At the risk of sounding ignorant, I have not been following news about the Congo and Sudan. So, if you have any background on that, I'd love to hear about it.
So I'm more familiar with what's going on in the Congo than what is actually I'm familiar with both, but I'm more familiar with the history than the current news. So it all goes back to the Rwandan genocide, right? When you go back to the Rwandan genocide, you had the Tutsi and the Hutus, right? And they were almost class-based tribes. And this has been coming up recently now that we're seeing what's going on in the Congo. But the Rwandan genocide and Bosnia were kind of like myths. So what really happened for the Rwanda genocide is you had Paul Kagame, who's still in power today in Rwanda, which has a big effect on the Congo. So Paul Kagame shot down an airplane that was carrying the president prime minister of Rwanda, and this caused massive violence between the Hutu and the Tutsis and reignited old, Hatfield and McCoy type tensions. He swoops in with the help of the CIA and becomes this kind of conquering hero. And I think even, people, you're not allowed to question the genocide. It's almost, I'm a super Holocaust believer. I would never question it. I might, say the numbers. It might not be 6 million. It might be 5.9. It might be 5.8. It could be less. But it's definitely a genocide. I'm not doubting the genocide there. But I think even in Rwanda, you had a kind of similar agenda to kind of promote this one group and call them genocide victims, which allows them to keep on killing the Hutus. So what he was doing, so Paul Kagame has been supporting a group called the M23 Rebels, and I'm pretty sure it's with the help of the CIA. And what they do is they keep a constant state of war in the Congo, which has been at war almost since they killed Patrice Lumumba. And then they who was a dictator from when we were kings. Well, they installed this other horrible dictator in the Congo. Paul Kagame right now in Rwanda is supporting this group called the M23 Rebels. And they're the ones committing like the genocide, rape, child soldiers, etc. He's denied it. He's been helped by Susan Rice, old Obama advisor. She was floated around as being Biden's VP before Kamala, and they were even saying that she was, one of Biden's most influential advisors. But Susan Rice, Samantha Power, Gail Smith, who went on to be head of USAID, these kind of this is again where identity politics kind of goes wrong when they say, you know what, we need a woman genocide promoter, and so you have all these women, and I do think in general that women are nicer than men, but I do feel in this competitive landscape that you do have your Hillary Clintons, your Margaret Thatchers, and these women who kind of have to prove that they're more bloodthirsty than the men. So these people all supported Paul Kagame. And what they really know is it's the coltan there. So it's kind of like gold, diamond is a very valuable mineral that's used to create our iPhones, tablets, batteries for Teslas and such. So there's been having a constant state of war there. Rwanda, which doesn't have any coltan native to it, is able to take all the coltan, build up an economic power base because of this. So right now what's been going on and has been going on for a long time in in the Congo has been a war over minerals. In Sudan, you have a Muslim population, and then you also an Arab population and a black population, and they split between North and South Sudan, and which is a big deal. There was this guy Roger Smith, and Roger Smith was one of the backers of Paul Kagame, but he was also a backer of all these kind of radical people in the Sudan to kind of start the tension there, which is really over oil. I think more of the oil is in the north. So we're seeing again, like, child soldiers, rape, and it's kind of what we've seen a little bit in Libya, where the kind of American propaganda is always, you never know who the good guy or the bad guy is, because America is making the good guy out to be the bad guy and the bad guy out to be the good guy. But basically, what's going on in Congo and Sudan has been going on for a long time. It's just kind of escalating right now, and a lot of it has to do with CIA interference, because they want the oil in the Sudan and they want the coltan in the Congo. So we're seeing wars over minerals where people might not understand the difference between a Hutu or a Tutsi, or a North Sudanese or a South Sudanese, but they play along tribal or religious tensions. They'll put the Muslims against the Christians. They'll pit one tribe against each other, and they'll favor one, and they'll let that particular tribe or religious group hold power in the country while oppressing the other. So it still definitely relates to the USA. The USA is playing a big role. It's a little more complex in Israel. I think Israel is pretty, if not black and white, brown and white, because you have a very poor population of mostly brown people, and then you have a rich and powerful population of some brown Israelis, but a lot are European Aznahahi Jews going against killing people. And I think that, throughout history, I think people have seen the lens of oppression through colonialism and slavery. So if you see, a white person killing a black person or something like that, it kind of triggers. But people aren't really able to differentiate sometimes when they see black people fighting black people
Yep.
of what's going on, because there are other lines, but usually it's the same force. So the same force that's supporting Israel is supporting Paul Kagame, is also supporting, the dictators in the Sudan, or the rebel forces, depending on who's in power. If they have a dictator in power that they like, they'll support him. If they have a dictator or a democratically elected leader that they don't like, then they'll support the rebels. So this is what's been going on. So you might have a change in leadership, but once you have that change in leadership, you're going to have a coup that's usually backed by the CIA, or a violent revolution. So it's black people in Africa being caught up in the desire for oil and coltan. So that's what's happening in the Congo and the Sudan. It's been going on for a long time. It's just been escalating recently, and people have been paying attention to it. And yeah, Paul Kagame has been in power since the Rwandan genocide, so going on 30 years, and no one's calling him a dictator. And there's a lot of myth about Rwanda being this kind of Zamunda ideal African country, when it's really based on killing people in the Congo. So they're keeping the Congo fighting going by supporting the M23 rebels. And America, I'll look at my notes and I can break down the Sudan a bit better for you. But a lot of that is going on over oil, and a lot of that is America exploiting the tensions between the Muslims and the Christians. And remember, there was a while back when they were like, stop slavery in the Sudan, and there was
Yep.
a kind of big movement. Like, that was a movement because America was on the pro-Christian side, but the Christians were having the child soldiers and the slaves too. Like, if you remember Kony 2012 in Uganda, Kony was this big demon, but then we realized the Ugandan government itself was doing everything that Kony was doing. In Nigeria, you had, Boko Haram, and they were these big devils. But then again, you had the Western Nigerian supported government who were, doing the same thing that Boko Haram was doing. So it's just, you really can't, especially, you can't trust like CNN and mainstream media on news on Africa, because it's always going to be guided specifically by the CIA or the State Department.
Bring back our
Oh,
girls. That was the big one.
Bring
yeah.
back our girls. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Was it Mobutu? Is that who you were thinking of?
Mobutu, yes, Mobutu.
Ben got it.
When we were kings, yeah, America
Yeah.
supported him. They killed Patrice Lumumba, and then they put Mobutu in power in the Congo, and he had a long reign. And then there was like a series of assassinations and coup. And I think that, especially like the CIA loves chaos. So like even what happened in Libya, like Gaddafi was killed 15 years ago, and it's been a constant state of civil war there. But when you have a state of chaos, it's a lot easier to exploit the resources.
There's supposedly a really good movie that was just made about the Lumumba assassination called Soundtrack for a Coup. Have you heard about this?
Yes. Yeah. I haven't seen it, but I've seen one of my friends promote. Is it a documentary or is it a feature?
I
I've seen the
thought it was a
posters and
doc.
everything. I definitely want to see it.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
it was a
it's a doc.
documentary. Yeah, but
Yeah,
I heard it's great.
yeah.
Um,
I need to see it. Hopefully, it'll come to streaming soon.
yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, I gotta find.
Casey, are you working on anything new?
I am. Some of it's a bit top secret, man. I wish I could tell you about it, but it's definitely gonna shake up the world, man. I'm really excited. I
Yeah.
don't know if I can leak it yet, but
Well, we
I've
all have
definitely been
signal.
doing a lot of research onto hip hop, mafia, old mafia, organized crime. Um, a lot of things that I necessarily didn't think of were conspiracies in hip hop. I'm kind of finding out they are, and then I've been researching like how the mafia was working with the CIA to like sell heroin, going back to the 40s. Like I thought it was just like I thought it started in the Vietnam War that they started bringing the heroin in, but no, the CIA's been like selling smack since its inception in the 40s, and they was targeting black communities from then. So I should have some new books out soon. I should have a new podcast that I'm really excited about that I think can really allow me, to stop preaching to the choir and reach out to people who might not be as educated as you and enlighten them to the certain conspiratorial elements. And I wish I could tell you more, but I will tell you more because I will be
All
back
right.
when I.
Well, we gotta have you back on when you're ready to spill.
Yeah, no, I'm really
Yeah.
excited about this one, man.
All right. Well, yeah, keep us informed. Yeah.
Yeah,
Casey,
no, it's original theories, man. Because a lot of time I just kind of find myself aligning myself with other people's theories. I always look at everything I can, look at all the positions I can, and then usually I find the person who is right. But now there's certain situations where I'm like, wow, everyone is wrong. So it should be pretty exciting to come out to bat with my own theories and be able to debate and promote them. And I'm looking forward to coming and promoting it on you guys' show real soon.
Great.
please. Casey, always a pleasure, man.
Always, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Great conversation.
Yeah,
Great questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for
Take
coming.
care. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me rock.
That was our conversation with Casey Gane. Thank you for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe, follow us, share us with your friends.